Bernth Charles from Bernth Charles. Great to have you here at Noise11, and I know you must be packing your bags, getting ready for the Australian trip. It's not too far off.
Not that far in advance, not that prepared.
I don't blame you. Escape the Internet, the show that is coming up, is promised to be concert, conversation, and instruction. So in what ratio will you be feeding the audience over the course of the evening?
Well, it'll start off, I think, with instruction, and that's for the VIP tickets. So we always do a kind of Q&A clinic before every show. And so that's where they get to ask questions. We teach them techniques about guitar and bass and anything they want to know about music or the music business. And then we do the meet and greet. So that's where the conversation comes in, and we take photos and answer more personal questions, maybe that they're afraid to ask in front of everyone else. And then after that is the main show, which, so it'll be the Omnific first, and then we'll play a 90-minute set. And that's more of a concert. There's still a little bit of conversation, I'd say, not so much instruction for the general audience, but there's a lot of challenges. We get them to clap polyrhythms, all of these sorts of fun things.
I would imagine, considering how much information you've already given out on the internet, the widespread audience that's already seen that, it must be difficult for the audience to come up with a new question for you guys. And it's very difficult for me to come up with a new question for you guys. But one of the videos I did see, Bernth, it was about, you were talking about somebody who had sort of faked your profile, or, there was songs that were going up on the internet, one of them in the Cobra Kai soundtrack, and it had your name in there, but you weren't even aware that it was there or how that came to be.
Yeah, the one that I showed where I did play on the Cobra Kai soundtrack of the Netflix show, so that's a legitimate one. But one day, a couple of days ago, when I checked out those records that I'm supposedly featured on, there was one that I've never seen before, and that's not a good sign if it says you're featured on an album that you've never seen. And I listened to the track, and it was really bad. And it looks like, I don't know if it's a glitch at the moment with distribution platforms or with Spotify in general, that almost anyone could, through less legitimate distribution platforms, upload a song and then say, Bernth actually played on this song, he's a collaborator. And then it just ends up on your Spotify profile, and people listen to that thinking it's you. So that was a little bit scary. And since I posted this video yesterday, and a couple of artists have already reached out and said they have the same problem, so I don't seem to be the only one.
Yeah, that makes an even a further problem down the track. When we had the recent news that Daniel Ek was investing in AI companies. He has no problem with that sort of thing, but that's going to be a big problem for artists moving forward.
And I have some friends that are not as deep into music as I am, and they're already listening to some lo-fi playlists where they don't really care about did people actually make that lo-fi music, or is it just an AI-generated playlist? So it will be interesting to follow all that stuff, but what's kind of scary as an artist is not only all of that stuff, but also that it doesn't seem to be very kind of foolproof when it comes to people just uploading tracks in your name. I mean, I've heard of artists where it's not just a featured track, where it's actually a new song, supposedly, that's released through their main distribution channels, and it's not them. So it's just exactly like you release a song, it's on Spotify, Apple Music, on all the platforms, but you didn't even write it. That's the kind of scary thing, to just wake up and find out you released a single and it's really bad. And all your fans think, what's wrong with him? So that's kind of weird.
Charles, I'll ask you a question because, in looking at your videos, I discovered that we have a friend in common in Victor Wooten.
Oh,
And
nice.
Victor's been a very high praiser of your work.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I only met him really for the first time a few weeks ago, where we played at Berkeley. I was teaching there, and we also jammed on stage, which was a pretty interesting experience because we didn't jam on the song that I thought we were going to jam on. It was a song I'd never heard before. And this was basically my first time ever playing with him. And it was in front of quite a lot of people, a few hundred. And he's my musical hero, basically. So that was a bit of a nerve-wracking moment because we are jamming on this song I'd never heard. And it was all improv. And usually I'm very prepared for things. Like for this tour, Escape the Internet, we rehearse a lot, mostly separately, but also together. And we play everything, as written. There's not too much improv going on. So that was, I got put outside of my comfort zone with that. But it's great. It's good to be outside of your comfort zone sometimes. And then, we did the interview the other day. I was at his camp, which was an amazing experience. It's a very cool place. It's in the forest in Tennessee, and they've got really cool teaching methods. There was one class I was watching where they had the students go into groups of 4, and then they had 10 minutes to come up with a 3-minute piece of music that conveys a specific emotion that they come up with, which I thought was a pretty interesting teaching method. But yeah, it's cool to know that you are also friends with Victor.
Yeah, and Victor, the Wooten brothers will be back down in Australia in, I think, February. Don't think I'm allowed to say that. Yeah, I think that's a big secret till next week.
Oh, yeah, I actually didn't know that.
Hey, between friends here, we can talk about their upcoming Australian tour. When we talk about great bass players, and there was that piece that I saw you do about Billie Jean and the bass playing on that, and it's just to me and my ears, and I'm not a musician. It seems like such a simple piece. What do you see in that I'm not seeing? I just see it as pure simplicity.
Well, it fits the song perfectly. It's insanely catchy, which is the most important thing, actually, for average people who just want to enjoy a song. They don't really care about any of the music theory behind it or how many notes per second you're playing. So it's the perfect catchy bass line that fits underneath everything. And I just kind of took it and, depending on your point of view, either embellished it or butchered it. I added lots of notes to it, made it a crazy bass solo because that's just kind of my thing, which I think sounds cool. I'm sure there are some people who prefer just listening to the original bass line, but I think it's cool to reimagine it as an insane slap bass solo.
And is that why another one, Bites the Dust, works so well as well?
Yeah, and it also works because it's 3 on E. I don't know if you've ever heard of that expression, 3 on E. So it starts off with ba 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 da ba 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 da. So those first 3, that's such a common thing in funk bass lines to have like ba ba ba. It's the same thing as Good Times, ba ba ba. So that's another reason why it works, is because it uses that tried and tested funk bassline method.
Bernth, let's talk Metallica, because you really drilled down on Metallica, into Kirk Hammett, into Creeping Death. You've got a very specific point that you can show people your inspiration for wanting to pick up a guitar.
Definitely. I mean, I think I kind of shared that with Charles even. I don't want to speak for Charles, of course, but I think they were both big inspiration for us, especially at the start. And for me, I kind of started out listening to new metal back then when bands like Slipknot and Korn were really big. And I didn't really hear the guitars at all. It was all about the vocals and about the general feeling of the music. But when I heard Metallica for the first time, the first thing I noticed is that the riffs are really great, very memorable. And that actually wanted me to, I just wanted to play them on a guitar. And once I could play a couple of riffs, I started listening to the solos, and I thought, well, they they're actually also quite good, especially on the first couple of records, and they weren't too scary to dive into them. So that's where kind of my passion for lead guitar came from. And I still love the bands to this day. I know that they're kind of a meme and heavily discussed on the internet, especially Kirk in the online guitar community, because he's maybe not putting as much effort into the solos anymore as it did in the 80s. But I also don't know what will happen in like 40 years if I will be that passionate about this stuff. I'm just happy that he came up with such iconic parts. And I think he inspired a lot of guitar players to start playing, which is pretty important, I would say.
What about somebody like George Harrison? So you've got a guitarist in the greatest band on earth, but when you break down the individual Beatles, and Charles, you'd probably agree with Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney is not the greatest bass player. George wouldn't have been the greatest guitar player, but we have the greatest band as a result of that. What's your take on that?
I feel like I've heard several interviews of them saying the exact same thing in the case of Metallica, where they're like, we're not really the greatest musicians. They interestingly did have a phase in the late 80s, which was kind of my favorite record, and Justice for All, when I think Kirk was studying intensely under Satriani, and Lars was also practicing quite a lot, where they did aim for more progressive and technical stuff, but it's definitely not their most commercially successful record, because the songs got longer and longer and more complicated. So I definitely also agree with what Charles said before. It's kind of makes the difference of if you want to write a great song or if you want to show off. We're often kind of in the middle because we do like virtuosity quite a lot, and we like pushing the instruments and our abilities as far as possible. But I still think about what you said about like great music, and I guess that's our mission statement, kind of combining those two worlds of like a great band, memorable songs, but also pushing the instruments forward. At least that's how I see it.
Some bands are great bands because they have rhythm and lead. AC/DC, Malcolm and Angus, Rolling Stones, Keith and Ronnie. Does a combination of rhythm guitar and lead guitar make for a greater band, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I always come back to Metallica, of course, because it's my main inspiration, but James is such a great rhythm guitar player. And he, to my knowledge, also played rhythm guitar on all the albums. When I was a kid, I always thought they were in the studio, all of them together recording the tracks. But in reality, James was pretty much playing all the guitars, which also meant that Kirk could focus on the solo spots, which can be cool. But in our case, I think that's the most interesting thing, because it's not the traditional guitar and bass scenario, because Charles is not exactly playing rhythm parts all the time. We're kind of both in a lead position, but kind of naturally found a cool way of accompanying each other. So we're not playing solos at the same time constantly. It's a nice back and forth. So that's the most interesting thing about what we are doing, figuring out these arrangements.
Charles, The Who and John Entwistle. And, I was watching a documentary a few weeks ago about John Entwistle and The Who. And, it was newly for me to discover, but he basically played lead guitar on a bass.
Yeah.
Is that common?
No, definitely not. And it's not common to do it well. Because, bassists sometimes get flack for being failed guitarists. That's a bit of a joke. But it's founded in a little bit of truth. Sometimes that is the case. And sometimes there are bassists who want to be guitar players, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But it doesn't always go so well if they haven't really got it dialed in. So like Billie Sheehan is an example of someone else who plays the bass often in a guitar-ish way and absolutely destroys, because he's practiced it so much and he's just really got it down. And John Entwistle is also, an early pioneer of someone who did that. And of course, he does it very, very well. but that's not always the case. I think it's difficult. I'm not giving anyone any flack for not doing it successfully, but it is hard to pull it off.
How important is the drummer to the bass player?
Extremely important. If the bass and drums are fully locked in, hitting the hits perfectly in time with each other, it makes the band sound a million times better. It makes everything sound really concrete and tight. And it allows, in a traditional setup where the bass is playing more regular bass lines, it allows the lead instruments to shine. It allows the lead instruments to play without worrying about whether the drums or bass are out of time. They can just almost forget them and focus on playing the best lead stuff that they can. So it's really important for the drums and bass to be locked in with each other.
But, like this has exploded in the last couple of years over the internet for you guys. In moving forward, how much of it will evolve into starting to concentrate on just the original music? So
it's been really important for me to not just make videos kind of without a clear goal. The music always was part of it for me, but I wasn't sure over the years if those views on the internet actually translate into people showing up for concerts, because it's one thing to just click on a video or to leave a like and a comment, and another thing to leave your house, buy a ticket, and actually show up to a gig. So that's been on my mind for a couple of years. And 2 years ago, I just decided to give it a try and to go on my very first tour all by myself, kind of with a small crew. And we found that people actually do come out to see this stuff in real life, which was really game-changing. So the goal was just making it bigger and bigger, which we're doing at the moment. Like with the last tour I did together with Charles and All England, another guitar player who's mostly known through YouTube, where we actually had quite a lot of sold out shows in Europe. Now we're going to China, South Korea, Australia, and also have some plans for the US, and the next European tour is also almost fully booked for next year. So music and content kind of go hand in hand for me. And I'm always searching, because it's not that easy to get people to click on a pure music video anymore, because people are used to consuming content and crazy headlines, and that's what people click on. So I always find it a fun challenge to, especially when it comes to YouTube videos, to get someone to actually listen to a brand new song without them even knowing what they're clicking on. So I still like making content for sure, but to me, as you said, music, that's what it's all about for me. I don't just want to be a guy talking about stuff on the internet. I also want to play my instrument.
Well, we're looking forward to having you down here. Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. So Brisbane on the 31st at the Tivoli, Melbourne on the 1st at Northcote, and Sydney on the 2nd Metro. So it's going to be a short visit, but a fun visit. And at least you'll be down here when the weather changes. It's a little nippy in Melbourne right now.
Okay. Nice.
All right. We look forward to seeing you guys down here. And thanks for joining us here at Noise11 today.
Cool. Thanks for having us.